I do not consider myself to be an artistic person, so it can sometimes take me by surprise that I was able to improve my painting skills from this to this within about a year. So in this video, I'm going to share how I did it and the three main pillars I focus on when trying to improve my nail art, and that's products, tools, and techniques. I've also snuck in a couple hot tips that I've been getting a lot of questions about lately. But before we get into the products, tools, and techniques that have helped me improve my nail art, the very first thing we need to do is to define our goal. For me, this is thinking about the result I want to achieve. This might be a set of nails I want to recreate, a specific technique I really want to try, or a texture I want to try to emulate. I start by mapping it out in my nail planner, naming it, describing the vibe, pulling any inspo photos, roughly sketching them, and then starting to think about the products and colors I will need to pull the set off. Which brings me to pillar number one of improving my nail art, and that is products. Understanding my products is an essential part of being able to get the results I want when I sit down to paint. There are so many gels on the market. I made an entire video about the different types of clear gels and their purpose, but in short, every gel has a number of properties. So for example, it might be a soft or hard gel, wipe or non-wipe, matte or glossy. Paying attention to these properties opens up the possibilities for your nail art. Two specific properties of gel that I lean on for my nail art all the time are opacity and viscosity. Opacity refers to the amount of light that gel allows to pass through it, or the amount of background surface you can see through the gel. So here I'm demonstrating the difference between anywhere from an entirely transparent to an opaque gel. In the nail product world, you'll often hear words like clear, glass, jelly, syrup, or cream. These are clues as to where that gel falls on the opacity scale. When painting, I leverage opacity to help me create depth, color transitions, layers, dimension, and shadow. If my work ever feels one-dimensional, I'll mix up the opacity of the gels to add more depth. You can always play with the opacity of whatever gel you have by mixing in a clear gel. I'm realizing as I'm recording this, I'm speaking as if I'm some sort of master painter. I am so far from that. It's just that these are the techniques that have helped me not be so trash, you know? So take it all with a grain of salt. In addition to opacity, the other property I always pay attention to in gels is viscosity. Viscosity is the measure of a fluid's resistance to flow, so really how thick or runny the gel is. Clear gels with a higher viscosity are good for doing things like building structure, encapsulating nail art, or making 3D elements. Colored gels with high viscosity are often referred to as painting gels. I used to think that all details should be painted with a painting gel, and that's not always the case, and here's why. When trying to paint this abstract blob shape, I really have to coerce the painting gel to go where I want it to go and to fill in the shape. Versus when I use a less viscous gel, I'm actually able to just flow that gel into the shape that I want it. So with objects that I want to have more movement, such as a line like I'm showing here again, this is the painting gel. Over and over again, I have to coerce it to go in the direction I want, versus if I use a gel that's lower viscosity level, it just naturally lends itself to have more flow. And so it's these sorts of decisions that you have to make when you're painting to pick the viscosity level that's right for what you're trying to do. Understanding this concept has not only yielded me better results, it's also allowed me to be a lot more efficient. Conversely, I do lean on painting gels for really highly detailed, fine line work, as I'm showing here. Because they're so thick, they don't budge at all. So if I really want to have fine lines, that's when I reach for the painting gel. You might be thinking, that can't just be the painting gel. What is that brush you're using? Because those lines are crazy. And thank you so much for asking. That brings me to my next point, which is tools. One of the things that has made the greatest impact on improving my nail art has been upgrading my brushes. I started out with cheap brushes from Amazon, but about a year into making nails, MPF Brush reached out with their newly launched product, which was nail brushes, and that kind of changed everything. Their origin story is fascinating. They started as a dental brush company, but realized there was so much overlap with nail products that they spent 2 years working with nail artists and in the product development lab to refine a new line of brushes specifically crafted for nail artists. And that is why I'm thrilled to share that MPF is sponsoring this video. The MPF Nails brush line includes a range of liner brushes, gel and acrylic brushes, and most recently, dotting tools. Two of my favorites are the 10mm liner brush for painting details and the 20mm liner brush for steady lines. The brushes have a universal magnetized tip, meaning you can own one handle and switch between brush tips. The handle can also be used in mag gel designs. One of my favorite features, however, is the spatula on the end. It's so useful for scooping out product, creating texture, or mixing a color. I use it all the time. MPF's ethos is an attention to detail and handmade quality that lasts, and frankly, that is something I feel genuinely excited to share with you. So if you're interested in elevating your nail art and starting your MPF brush collection, you can use the code MINI10 for 10% off your order. The other tool that has helped me a lot in improving my nail art is a ring palette. By having a palette really close to my brush, I'm better able to manage the load of gel on the actual brush itself and easily add or remove gel as needed. Which brings me to the next pillar, which is techniques. You can have all the best products and tools in the world, but you need to know how to use them. Paying attention to how you are applying the gel and the result it gives you equips you with a toolbox of techniques to achieve desired results. So here are 5 of my favorite painting techniques I've learned so far. Number 1 is brush load. How much gel you pick up on the brush and where it sits on the brush makes a huge difference to the type of line you're able to make with the gel. To get an even and consistent line, I will work the gel through all of the bristles in the brush, trying to saturate it really evenly. If I'm just to drag the brush through the gel without working it through the bristles, you'll see here that very quickly I get an uneven load on the brush, and if I'm applying that to a nail, it will also give an uneven line. To avoid this, I saturate all the bristles and then I run it once through on a palette to remove any excess. The next consideration is the surface I'm painting on. Painting on a matte surface gives me way more control of my brush and the way the paint flows, getting a much more precise result. The easiest way to get a matte surface is just to remove the inhibition layer, but you could even take it a step farther and apply a matte top coat or lightly buff the surface of the nail with a really fine grit buffer. Think about how much easier it is to draw on paper than it is on plastic. Technique number 3 is anchoring. It's really hard to hold your hand entirely still, and so I will either anchor my hand or the nail directly to the desk or my pinky to my other hand, anything to increase stability and to make my lines steady. Technique number 4 is pressure and angle of your brush. You might have the best brush in the world, it might be perfectly loaded up, and you might be painting on the perfect surface, but if you're using the wrong pressure or the wrong angle, you're not going to get the result you want. This is a lesson I learn over and over again, and I have yet to master, but overall, here are the high-level basics. Firstly, if you have a light pressure and a high angle, you're going to get a thin, light line. If you have heavy pressure and a deeper angle, you're going to get a much deeper line. And then if you combine the two and you go from heavy pressure to light pressure, you're able to kind of feather the line itself. You can switch between different pressure angles in different alignments of your brush. It's kind of hard to explain, but the more you play with your brushes and the more you play with the pressure of the brush, and depending on the length of the brush you're using, the more you start to figure out what works and how much bend each brush has and what result you get, how far you can push it before the brush kind of like slips out from underneath you. 2 things are happening here. Firstly, look how much my hands are actually shaking from the coffee, and yet how smooth and consistent these lines are because the length of the brush is so long that it like removes the shake from my hand. And secondly, these lines are all made with the same brush and just different pressures and angles. So play around with your brushes and you'll be able to figure out what works and what doesn't. Lastly, technique number 5, bubbles. I've seen so many questions about this lately, and I guess it's something I just learned along the way, so let's talk about it. The way you get bubbles in your gel is by getting air into the gel, and the way you get air into the gel is by essentially moving it around a lot, shaking it up, kind of like the same way you get whipped cream, is you like whip a bunch of air into it. So in the first place, try to be gentle with taking your brush out of the bottle or pulling gel like out of the pot, and that will keep as many bubbles as possible out of the bristles of the brush. If you do end up with bubbles on your nail, happens to me all the time and you can see it happening here, the best way to remove them is to just like float them off with more gel. So you're just gonna like kind of keep wiping them, encouraging them off the nail, because if you cure it with a bubble in it, game over. It's there for good, like not worth filing it off. And you can kind of just do this over and over again until you get most of the bubbles out. There's still probably going to be a bubble or two. That's okay. That's life. They're ephemeral. Don't sweat it. Just do your best. I have saved the best for last, and if all of the other things I've been talking about fail you and you end up drawing a heart like this, where you're like, oh, one side's beautiful and the other side is ruining my life, you can wipe it away. That's the amazing part, is you don't have to keep it. I wipe things away all of the time, and that's the thing about practice. It can be hard, and it often means sitting down and making some bad things, but that is essential to discovering what doesn't work to ultimately learn what does. So keep applying your failures and be kind to yourself when you fail. It doesn't mean you're inherently bad, it just means you haven't found the perfect combination of product, tool, and technique yet. If you have any products, tools, or techniques that you swear by, I would love to know what they are. Once again, thank you to MPF for sponsoring this video, and thank you for taking the time to watch. I hope you found it helpful, and I will see you again soon with another video.